Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. Hall should be here very, very soon to join me. Reed will not be here for this episode of the Burgundy Zone titled, What's Next? And the Burgundy Zone is a part of the Frederick Podcast Network. You can find out more by going to www.listenfrederick.com. And to help us digest this season and what is next for Washington fans and this team, we thought I'd bring in insider Mr. David Harrison of Locked On Commanders. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. How are you doing on this beautiful Wednesday, sir?
No, I appreciate the invite as always. I'm doing good, man. Hope you've been well also.
Somewhat. Just getting over being sick. I did Sunday's episode after the game, and you know, it was a poor way to be sick, but honestly, if I'm going to be sit down watching, I'd rather watch them any day of the week, you know. But that being said, as much as it was a bad ending to such a fantastic and magical season here for Washington people, what did we learn this season?
I think we learned that this team has a very good grip on who they are and who they want to be. You know, when you look at the amount of roster turnover that this team just went through, you know, over 60%. When you look at the active roster on the final day of the season versus the active roster on the first day of last season, I think it was 63% is what we came in for differences between the two rosters. That's a massive amount of change. And you know, we talked about this before. You know, new coach, new coordinators, rookie quarterback, massive roster turnover. Like, those are all reasons usually you have NFL teams take a step back or struggle for a little while, but this team didn't do that. You know, 7-2 starts, makes it to the playoffs, makes a run into the NFC Championship game. And I think it really all goes back to understanding what your identity is, what you want it to be, and finding the right people that fit it.
Absolutely. And now we are joined by my co-host, Mr. Michael Hall. What's up, Hall? Do you have a question for David? All I did was ask him about what we learned this season.
Right. Well, the off season's here, and just looking forward, Senior Bowl's going on. Obviously, the defense was one of the bigger problems for this team throughout the season and into the playoffs, especially that last game. What do you think is the biggest position to need, offense or defense, for this team right now?
Yeah, I think you got to look at the front seven, you know, and obviously, you know, a guy like Frankie Louvu had a pretty solid year, especially in his first year in this system with Joe Witt Jr. Bobby Wagner wants to come back, so if they can work out a deal to bring him back. You've got two really solid positions there. Dante Fowler, you know, Dante is an interesting case study. I'm going to dive deeper into his season later on my own show, so I haven't done all the research on that yet. But kind of the hypothesis I'm going into that study already equipped with is kind of he was a little bit of a hot and cold type of player. You know, when he was making impacts, he was making big impacts, and it was very, very well received. But then there were just moments or even games and stretches where he just didn't have the impact you want to see from a full-time starting outside linebacker edge player. You know what I mean? And then how much of the problems of setting the edge on this defense can you tie to Dante versus, you know, scheme flow and other things happening, because everything is interconnected. So he's an interesting case study, you know, because you look at the stats and more sacks than anybody else on the team. So that tells you, you know, right off the bat, you would say, well, you obviously want to bring him back. And I think you certainly would like to. The question is, you know, where does that fall in the pecking order? And then obviously the run defense and run defense pretty much, you know, more often than not starts up front with gap discipline. And so you got to go back there, and you go back to the games that Carl Davis was active for. And yes, you know, Coach Quinn or Coach Witt, you know, why Carl Davis, why are you bringing him up, stuff like that. And they just always talk about how he can just stay square and stay in his spot. And that's such a big ability to have. So, you know, all of those things combined, you want to get pass rush pressure. You want to get immediate penetration to run defense if you can, to disrupt the flow of the run game and knock the linemen off of their spots instead of getting knocked off your spot. So I think just by and large, you need to get better up front and figuring out the formula, which pieces to replace, which pieces to bring in is going to be key.
Yes, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure Dan Quinn had said in the previous press conference with Adam Peters that you ask really good questions. And so my question for you is, what was your biggest takeaway from that exit press conference with Coach Quinn and Adam Peters?
I mean, from not just that press conference, but from conversations with with Dan Quinn off to the side. And I'm fortunate enough that I get to attend the DQ's interviews with Chick Hernandez every week. I write those interviews for a story for WSA9.com. So I get to be in the room while they're doing that. And there's just a little bit of time sometimes before and after to have, just little, we call them off the record conversations, but it's not like we're getting state secrets in those conversations anyway. But I think, there's a sense of pride, you know what I mean, in what this group was able to do in year one, but there's also that the same sense of disappointment that any team has when they make it to the championship round and aren't successful and don't make it to the Super Bowl and you're not successful there. Look, I mean, either the Eagles or the Chiefs are going to have the exact same vibe around them next weekend next weekend then as these two teams have around them right now, the Bills being the other one, obviously coming out of this weekend. So there's a little bit of that, but then, I think when you look at, AP just kind of locking back in, saying, all right, time to get to the Senior Bowl. It's time to find more commanders. Dan Quinn talking about, sitting down with the coaching staff and figuring out who the commanders are. And I think that's, or who on the roster, rather, I should say, are still commanders and they believe can be commanders and who they need to replace. And I think that's a big thing. We go into the offseason and actually had a conversation with Martin Mayhew not that long ago about how he hates the term offseason because there is no offseason, and Tuesday, Chick and David, the shooter there for WSA9 that does all the great camera work. And we get to Ashburn to do the interview with Dan Quinn for one last time this season. And the parking lot's full. You know what I mean? Like if you didn't know any better, you'd think there was probably going to be a practice pretty soon. And, we run into a couple of players in the building and things like that. So like, yeah, the season is over as far as the games and the standings and the records and the yards and all that stuff. But the work is not stopped. The work has not stopped being done. And there's still a lot of work going on to make sure that when these things spin back up, that they're able to take advantage of these opportunities.
Definitely. Just judging off of, obviously there's only one season of data on what type of offseason I like to have, but just kind of looking back at Adam Peters' track record and even Dan Quinn's track record to an extent, what do you think the biggest priority would be as far as like being able to sustain going into next year and maybe not having that sophomore slump as like one of those up and coming teams going into next year?
I think you just have to be honest. Like that's the biggest priority, honestly, has to be being honest about what you're talking about. There's a lot of relationships here, right? And you go back to Dante Fowler. I mean, Dante Fowler and Dan Quinn go back to Florida, Atlanta, Dallas, now here in Washington. Like they've got a tight bond. They've been to a lot of places together. And it's hard to overlook as human beings. Like we would all like to say, you just keep it business and you just keep it what it is. And at the end of the day, I'm confident that that's what it will become, is just business, no matter what the decision is. But it's hard, I mean, everybody's a human being. Everybody has that ability to connect with somebody. So they've got to have honest conversations about, all the guys that they're going to either bring back, not bring back, and why. And then from there, figure out, okay, what does the free agent market look like? What does the draft class look like? How can we do these things and how can we go about doing it the right way? Because it's going to be the same goal every year. Adam Peters talked about it a lot last season. It's optionality. You don't want to get to April. There's some people who actually think the draft should happen before free agency, give you the opportunity to go get your young prospects, then do free agency and fill with veterans. Because what does every successful GM say? We build through the draft, we supplement through free agency, yet free agency comes first. So you're going to supplement before you build, right? Like it's kind of like installing the windows before you build the wall. Like it doesn't really work that way. Yeah. But the system is what it is. So you've got to do your best to kind of try to anticipate and do all these things. But as long as they stay true to the formula, right? Because I know everybody wants to know, is Adam Peters going to go for broke, like spend the big money, go get the big name, go after T. Higgins and do all these things. And I don't think that's the answer. It's the fun answer. It's the thing that would certainly make ESPN and, Good Morning Football put the Commanders up there at the top of the NFC power rankings and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, remember how they got here. And like you said, it's a very small window. It's a 1-year window. But when you look at what they did, they didn't go after the Danielle Hunters. They didn't try to trade for Stephon Diggs. They didn't trade for Brandon Ayuk. They went out and they said, we want guys who are going to come here and be part of the process, be part of the group, not guys who want to be in front of the group. You know what I mean? People are going to rise to the top. Leaders are going to shine eventually, no matter what. But even like you look at a guy like Bobby Wagner, man, like, I'm sure that Bobby did break down the huddle, break down the team before games and all that stuff here and there. but I can't honestly tell you a single moment where I saw Bobby Wagner just need to be that front-facing guy. Terry McLaurin, same type of dude. Jaden Daniels, obviously, same type of dude. Like we asked him in the locker room cleanout day to talk about his own season. And I think he said like 5 words. He's like, I'm not looking about my own season. Then you ask him about his teammates and he goes on for like 2 minutes. You know what I mean? Like just a dude who's not focused on himself. So when people want these big names and all these other things, those are great. But this team has to make sure that they're protecting what they've already built. Because if they bring in the wrong people, it's just going to dismantle all of that.
My man. And obviously this week right now, currently going on, is the Senior Bowl. And so Adam Peters, Lance Newmark, our scouts are down there. But that being said, David, I know we don't have a magic ball here to be able to see into the future. But if you were to say concretely, what positions need to be addressed purely in the draft, would you have confidence saying in any position?
Yeah, I mean the trenches and running back. Like, I'm a big believer. First person I ever heard say this actually isn't even in the NFL, but it's actually Trevor Sikkema at Pro Football Focus, and this is before his Pro Football Focus days when he was a beat reporter covering the Buccaneers, and we were talking about team building. And Trevor and I are similar in that this is our favorite time of year. Like truthfully, man, I love the games. Playoff atmospheres, the home atmosphere in Northwest Stadium was electric this year. I love all of that. I love practice. I love interviewing players, chopping it up with them, all this stuff. But this is my favorite time of year where you start to try to rearrange the pieces, insert new pieces, and figure out the formula. And Trevor's the same type of way. And every single year, it's smart for a team to address pass protection, passers, playmakers, pass rushers, and pass defenders. Like those are the things every single year you need to address in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, this team has what I think everybody can believe is a franchise quarterback as a passer, right? So now it's like, okay, well, who's our backup? You know what I mean? And do we still have confidence in Marcus Mariota? I think that in the limited opportunities he got this season to operate Cliff Kingsbury's offense, I think you can certainly say you have some confidence there. So if they can get a deal done there, then you address that passer situation before you ever get to April. Now we get to April. How's our pass protection? How are we going to improve that? Where's our pass rush? All those things. So I think you need to address all of those. And then I add the running back position just because the only running back in the NFL that you honestly should be looking to pay a second contract to are the Saquon Barkleys of the world. Like if you don't have a Saquon Barkley, you are hopefully putting a guy in the chute, developing behind them to replace them because it's just unfortunately and every year that the running backs start to sound off about how unfair their market is, I totally feel for them. I totally understand where they're coming from. But when I try to put myself in the seat of a GM and a budget manager, I got to tell you, I agree with the way that they handle it. You know what I mean? So you look at a guy like a Trevion Henderson, depending on where he ends up landing. I'm an Arizona State Sun Devil, so Cam Scatterbo is obviously a guy that I'm going to have my eye on no matter where he ends up. Judkins. I mean, there's a lot of talented running backs in this year's class. So I think if you're the Washington Commanders, you got B-Rob, you got Austin Eckler under contract, you got Chris Rodriguez Jr., who's an exclusive rights free agent, so there's no reason not to bring him back. So you got to draft a running back. You know what I mean? Now, the question is, which type of running back are you looking for? I think a lot of that depends on how much confidence you have in Brian Robinson Jr. If you think that he can be your bell cow primary back next year, then maybe go look for the future Austin Eckler. And, can't look too far into the future, but 2026, if Brian Robinson's not the answer and we're not going to pay him to come back, then maybe go draft another between the tackles type of dude. And hopefully that future Austin Eckler has developed a little bit and we can kind of pair the young rookie with that guy. And that's the reason you need to go after some of these guys every single year is you just need to constantly kind of have that flow going into it.
That being said, obviously running back is something Washington should go into the draft with, holding the 29th pick in the draft, and they have 7 selections, 3 in the 7th round. That being said, David, should Washington draft a kicker?
No, I don't think Washington should draft a kicker. I'm not big on drafting kickers. Actually, it's funny. The last kicker that I think I publicly vouched for somebody maybe drafting, interestingly enough, was Zane Gonzalez when he was coming out of Arizona State. And no, it was not just an Arizona State thing. It's actually really strange because Zane Gonzalez and Roberto Aguayo are the only 2 kickers tape I've ever studied. And it's a very amateur study. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a special teams coordinator. I'm not a kicking coach. So I'm not looking at leg swing and plant foots and all that stuff. What I was simply looking at, because Roberto Aguayo, right, the record-setting field goal percentage holder for NCAA football and all that stuff. The problem with Roberto's game coming out of Florida State is a lot of his makes, especially beyond like 35 yards, were barely inside the uprights. And in the NFL, those are misses. But when you look at Zane Gonzalez, more often than not, his makes were also within NFL goalpost range. So I actually came out like around that time frame saying like I'd rather have a Zane Gonzalez than a Roberto Aguayo, even though the quote unquote accolades would tell you that Roberto is the better kicker. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers agreed with that other aspect, and Zane Gonzalez ended up going to the Cleveland Browns. Was actually really on a tear until he got injured in that season. He's kind of battled injuries ever since then. But Zane has always been a very good kicker, very accurate kicker when he's healthy. The problem is when he's not healthy and then he tries to go out there like every kicker does and tries to battle through those injuries anyway, and it throws off the mechanics of everything. So yeah, man, like a lot. And I'll tell you right now, like if you just clip that, people will be like, oh man, like this dude studies kickers. No, I don't. Those are the only two kickers I've ever studied. But it was that reason. And I think Zane, fortunately for me, Zane, the more healthy version of Zane this year, came through. I think he, for the most part, proved me right.
Absolutely. Now, to wrap this up, only a couple more questions for you, David. But let's say, like what you talked about it before about the players returning, who would not surprise you to return? There's a lot of guys on this roster that were on one-year deals. Who's some players on your mind that you think that should be able to return?
Yeah, well, real quick for the kicker thing, I actually did an episode on this for Locked On Commanders that dropped today. I think the Commanders need to bring back Austin Cyber and Zane Gonzalez, even if it's on a one-year deal, whatever it is. Let them battle it out in training camp to figure out, because I think they both did a really good job until Austin gets injured. Obviously, that was a big bummer for him. But yeah, that's what I think they should do at the kicker position. As far as other players are concerned, Bobby and Zach are the easy answers. Both have said they want to play. Both have said they want to do it back in Washington. With Cliff not leaving, I mean, look, Zach came to Washington for Cliff Kingsbury. There's no reason that he shouldn't stay in Washington for Cliff Kingsbury. So I think that they need to make that deal happen. Same thing with Bobby Wagner. So those are kind of easier ones. I know a lot of people have had questions about De'Ami Brown. I think De'Ami is a guy that I would like to see come back. The hard part about the evaluation on him is it really happened late in the season, and honestly, he's a guy that if this team doesn't make the playoffs, you don't ever get to see that real burst out of him in production. And we're probably talking about De'Ami being a guy like, okay, it was great having him around. He's a good dude. Really wish him the best, but he's going to go somewhere else. But now it's like, okay, I mean, I've seen some fans who were like, he could be the number 2 receiver. I wouldn't go that far. I think he's definitely a solid receiver, and certainly based on matchups can have some games where he explodes for you. But I don't think I'd pencil him in just as number 2 going into the offseason. But I wouldn't mind having him back, a combination of him, Terry. Obviously, Luke McCaffrey is going to be around as well. And then I think you need to bring back one of either Noah Brown or Olamide Zaccheaus. I don't think you bring them both back. I think you got to decide, and that's where one of those conversations has to be had of, who do we like best? If it's Noah, how much do we trust his body to stay healthy? The kidney thing is kind of a fluke type of injury. So how much do we hold that against him compared to the rest of his injury history and all that stuff versus Olamide? But I also think Jamison Crowder needs to come back. I think what he does on the field, not just the bond that he had with Jaden on third downs and in critical positions, but also as a punt returner, I think it's really important. So if you go by that math, you're talking 4 or 5 receivers on this roster already, which again, talk about the trickle down effect. Like, okay, so does that leave room for a T Higgins? You know what I mean? If it's T Higgins, then do you draft a guy? Because there's a lot of good receivers in the draft. So, these are some of the questions they're going to have to ask. But yeah, I think that you should bring a combination of those guys back. Because obviously this offense, even without that, top shelf number 2 receiver behind Terry was humming. I mean, 23 points against Philadelphia Eagles defense with 4 turnovers is actually fairly hard to do. Even though it comes in a massive loss. But it just kind of shows you how efficient that offense really could be without that bona fide number 2.
Absolutely. Now, one tricky question with Marshawn Lattimore. A lot of questions are being raised if that was the right trade or not to make. I'm not going to ask you that question. But do you think that Marshawn Lattimore and the emergence of Mikey Sainristil, and don't know about Noah Igbinogi at this point if he's going to be able to be retained or not, but do you think that corner is going to be something that this team is going to invest heavily in, even with Marshawn there?
I mean, I think that – so the question that has to be answered first. So Marshawn's not going anywhere. The question that has to be answered after that is, do you like Mikey enough to keep him outside, or are you willing to move him back inside? Mikey wants to stay outside. I'll tell you that right now. Mikey Sanders still,
Smart
if he
guy.
has his choice, he's going to stay outside. I think he should stay outside. I think this is one of those, if it ain't broke, don't fix it situations. You know, when Mikey first moved outside, I remember there was a press conference with Joe Witt Jr. probably like 3 or 4 weeks into Mikey being out there, where he said, yeah, eventually we'll move him back inside. But for right now, he's doing a really good job out there. That was then, this is now. I think right now he's shown you that he is a true blue, bona fide outside defender. Keep him there. I like Noah Igbenogany a lot. Very physical, very handsy. I warned Commanders fans on my show when he first got to the team. He's going to draw probably about a flag every, other game or so because of just how physical he is. It's always been part of his game. It just is what it is. I think he did a really good job, but I do think that, you could go into either free agency or the draft targeting an upgrade in the slot. Free agent targets to look out for would be Jordan Lewis, the Dallas Cowboys slot cornerback, who is a better slot corner than Noah Igbenogany is. And he's a little bit older, but I think he certainly could come in and basically be a plug and play player in Joe Witt Jr.'s defense. He obviously knows the defense very well. Another person, there's a Texas corner that, depending on who you believe and what projection, and again, we're in January, so the projections don't matter too much. But he could go end of first round, in which case, is that important enough to get a slot defender in there with them, given all their other needs? I don't know if I would go that high, honestly. But, if you go in the draft, you have Noah Igbenogany, if you can bring him back, and you have a situation where potentially you could say, look, if we need to go with Noah, again, this defense was like top 10 in preventing explosive passes all year long. Marshawn is going to get better. Marshawn's going to get healthier, for one. I'm not worried about Marshawn Lattimore. And I think the important thing to remember is Marshawn Lattimore was not traded necessarily for what he was supposed to do this year. He's traded for what he can do long-term for this team. And the great thing about his deal is there's really no jeopardy for the Commanders. They can get out of it any second they decide they need to, but I don't see that happening this offseason. Personally, I would go with Jordan Lewis. I would sign Jordan Lewis. I'd see if Noah's willing to come back or if he wants to hit the market and take his chances and maybe get a starting job somewhere else. If he does, then I'd target, 4th, 5th round, maybe go get another young slot guy because Jordan is a little bit older, and so you're going to need to eventually replace him anyway. But Jordan Lewis would be my priority there if I was the Commanders.
My man, I appreciate it, David. Before you get out of here, would you like to plug your social media handle in your show, just in case anyone watching hasn't followed you yet, sir, and would like to?
Yeah, sure. You can find me on X at dharrison82. I think my Instagram's the same. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. Locked On Commanders, those 5 days a week. 5 days a week, all off season. It doesn't stop. 365. We're doing it every Monday through Friday, and then commandergameday.com on the SI group of sites, and WUSA9.com. Not sure, we'll see. My deal with them was the season, so I'll do that through the Super Bowl, and we're talking about some stuff behind the scenes, so we'll see how long that'll keep up. But either way, whether I'm there or not, they're doing great work. So definitely keep up with WUSA9.
My man. David, have a great night, sir. Enjoy your week and the Senior Bowl, of course. Have a good one, sir.
I appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, sir. All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. David Harrison. What's up, Hall?
What up, though?
How are you feeling a couple days removed from the ass whooping?
I mean, to be honest, like the day of, obviously I was like pissed, like damn, they got blown out. But to be honest with you, I kind of had made peace with the loss the minute that Austin Eckler put that ball on the ground. I knew it was a wrap, so I'd already kind of started making peace with, okay, good season, blah blah blah, all that whatever stuff. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I still see like Eagles fans weirdly talking about Commanders fans. Like, I don't know, you guys are like playing the Chiefs in a couple like weeks. You should probably like focus on them now. But it is what it is. But yeah, so I mean, I've kind of already moved on, thinking about the off season, thinking about what's in store for free agency, the draft, stuff like that, and yeah, just looking forward to the stuff that's coming up in the off season, and hopefully some news or whatnot will start coming out as far as like signing, who they're looking at, who they met with at the Senior Bowl and whatnot. But
Everybody.
Oh yeah, I know. But
everybody.
But yeah, nah. So yeah, I mean, and I'm kind of like I said, whenever Austin Eckler fumbled the ball, I had already kind of been like, oh, this is a wrap. Season's over. So
Yeah. Yeah, look, man, it was a fantastic ride that they were on. I know our boy Ryan Fowler is currently at the Senior Bowl week right now. But let's answer some fan questions
Sure.
before we proceed. Of course, this one was submitted by Tony Franchise early this morning. Thank you, Tony. He asks, "Is it more likely the team keeps both Payne and Allen, or trade one? And if so, which one is traded?"
Mm. Um, I would think probably they're going to end up trading one of those guys just because I know a lot of the money on the defense is tied up in those guys. And if you're just looking at contract as opposed to production, like obviously it's not equaling out. I know Jonathan Allen, a lot of people coming into the season were already like, he's a trade deadline type of candidate before the injury and whatnot, just because I know he has no more guaranteed money on his deal. And obviously in the NFL, when you got no more guaranteed money on your deal, you're either looking to get a
Right.
new deal or you're looking to move on to, you're either looking to rework a new deal to kind of get some money up front from the current team, or you're just looking to, hey, I appreciate what you guys have done for me for X amount of years. I'm on to maybe greener or better pastures. But so yeah, I would say that probably one of them gets moved. If I had to choose one, I'd probably say Jonathan Allen, just because unfortunately, again, he's the one with no guaranteed money left on the contract. And I know Payne's the younger one, but I just feel like teams, if they're looking at the contract as far as like Deron Payne's contract and like the production that it's coming with, I feel like teams would kind of they give up like a fifth or a sixth or like something like that, maybe a fourth for Deron Payne, where as opposed to a guy like John Allen coming back from the injury, it seemed like he was getting better and better throughout the when he came back at the Atlanta game and then throughout the playoffs. It seemed like he was getting a little bit back to the Jonathan Allen of old. So maybe teams are looking at that like if he can get back to his self, 80% of himself from a couple years ago, we can use that on our defensive line. So me
Yeah.
personally, I would probably keep Jonathan Allen and move Payne, but just looking at money wise and all that stuff throughout the how GMs kind of think, I feel like they would take the guy that has the no guaranteed money and maybe get him on a cheaper type of contract because he is kind of a little bit older than Deron Payne.
Yeah, it's a kind of a trick question here, Tony, because like it's multi-layered, right? Because you have the general manager viewpoint of how much money is allocated, but then you add in the defensive coordinator, what fits them and what they like to do. I think Deron Payne being able to operate not only in that like three tech, that one tech kind of way, but also he was able to be used as a defensive end to kind of null those outside runs, right? And I know the big talk this week is setting the edge, setting the edge. We need an edge rusher that can set the edge. I would tell you it's a lot more than that, and I would say that we need a lot more speed. That being said, obviously Duran would warrant more in trade value. And so I do think that it's more likely that Washington retains both than one of them be or them over them being traded, if that makes sense. Just based on what could be brought back, right? But if you're gonna move any of them, I would imagine Deron Payne would be your tradable asset that you could possibly be able to recoup. Because right now they have a first, a second, a third. They don't have a fourth. They have a fifth. They don't have a sixth. They have 3 sevenths. And so you're kind of looking for those middle of the round, middle of the draft type of draft picks. Maybe Duran can warrant you something like that, be able to take some of that cap space away from you, and then go be able to target it through the draft of being able to build up something here. So if anything, I'll say probably Duran would probably be your best bet. Because with John Allen, I think it'd probably be more so of just walking away if they feel like if that works. But also it comes into play of what Joe Witt Jr. and them want to be able to do as a coordinator, right? And scheming and game planning, if that makes sense. So I'll say it's more likely that they keep both, but we'll see how that goes. Never know how that'll shape out. Next question is from Just Your Average Fly Guy. His question is, with so many free agents wanting to come to Washington, do you think players will take less to play here or try to make as much as they can?
I think it depends on where the player's at in his career. If it's a guy that's like I'm not gonna say like Zach Ertz because he's like the extreme of like on the back end of his career. But if it's a guy like I can't even think of a guy off the top of my head, like a Levante David, I guess he's on the back end too. I don't know. I can't think of a guy off the top of my head. But if it's a guy that's like that's out there and that's like starting to hit that back end of his prime or the back end of his like his career, and he's like, hey, I want to get kind of like a Bobby Wagner. I put him out there,
Okay.
kind of like a guy that's like, hey, I want to have one more go at it, one more shot, kind of try to ring chase, if you want to call it that. What team can I latch onto where they have a legit quarterback, a good coach, a good culture, and can do some things? And this would be the team. So I would definitely think that like I'm not gonna say like it'll be like the Bucks when they had Tom Brady, or like the Patriots with Tom Brady, when guys are just like, I'll take the league minimum to come here, because
Right.
I don't think we're in that stage of like the building process yet. But I would definitely like, think that you could get some veterans again in here, like the Bobby Wagner types, those Zach Ertz types, even the Austin Eckler types, that are the veterans that are looking for a new home, looking to say, hey, I still got something left in the league. Let me go show and prove it. And I'll take a little bit of a cut because I know there's other people around me that are going to make my job easier. So I could definitely see that going into next year, but definitely like down the road, once Jaden Daniels gets established, and they really got like things circulating here, I could definitely see guys coming here and being like, hey, I want to try to add a ring to my resume. Let me go down to Washington.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It depends on the circumstance. For instance, like if you're talking about T. Higgins, that's somebody that is going to want a payday. They watch his teammates get paid. He wants that
Right.
same kind of payday. So if you want somebody like that, of course T. Higgins would want to be a part of Jaden Daniels, but there's so much of a market for him, you're going to have to be able to put up some big money, right? But then like David Harrison brought up Jordan Lewis, who has a relationship with Joe Witt, obviously, and then obviously Dan Quinn. That's somebody that I think that would take less. Like we saw with Jeremy Chin, where he had the ability to go with Pittsburgh and was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go with Washington because I know what they do with secondary guys, right? And that's that sort of aspect I could see that does work out well for you in your favor, where it's that relationship, past relationship, and could work out for you that you don't have to overpay for, so to speak. But if you're going to go for those big money guys like a Josh Sweat, I think Josh Sweat would probably give that less money to stay with Philly much rather than he would do that for Washington, if that makes sense, just because of the pedigree. Like, regardless, if they're going to be top of their position, they have a market for him, I would expect you're going to have to pay a good amount for him. But for the most part, if you're looking for just being able to add depth and stuff like that, I think you can find guys in free agency that'd be willing to take less, like we saw last offseason, just to be able to get over here and kind of restart things and see if
Yeah.
we can make things mesh, right?
I think it'll be like one of those situations where, like, if you look at the past, where like Washington's in on this player, or like this player is linked to Washington, blah blah blah, and it comes out that like, hey, he took a 3 year deal for X amount of money, and it's like Washington, they matched the offer or had a better offer, but he chose that team. I think that we're starting to change that shift. We're starting to shift to where like, um, guys are like, okay, if it's an even match, or like maybe that offer's a little bit better, I'm still gonna pick Washington because I like what they got going on. They got
Right.
a young team up and coming. So I think we've shifted the corner as far as like, if it's an even offer, I'll choose
That's fair.
Washington. As it were to the past where it was an even offer, no, I'm going over there. I'm staying away from Washington. So I think that'll be more likely than the other one.
You're absolutely right. I'm sure that's what Not Your Average Fly Guy is like referring to, right? The
Right.
tipping of the scales, because we've seen it all season long that this is going to be a place where people want to be a part of. We already heard that before the trade deadline, right? I
Right.
mean, honestly, you could go back to Brandon Ayuk and say that there was a difference there. And even before that, you could say Jeremy Chin was really the indicator of saying that guy was willing to not go with Pittsburgh and here and decided to go with us because of what we have, right? But now it's a
Right.
completely different game. Now, the next question that we have is from the Colonel. He says, thank you guys for a great season. Hall, you have to admit the team exceeded our expectations. Please give me your fondest memory of the year. Personally, mine was when Jaden Daniels and Noah Brown crushed the spirit of the Bears and sent them spiraling into a painful coach firing season.
That is a great memory, and that will definitely be one of the hallmark sets. Not even just for like the season, that'll be a hallmark for like just like the franchise going forward. As far as like, this is what kind of kicked off the new era of like Commanders football, because I feel like that was like the one of the bigger turning points of the season, because we were kind of at that crossroads of, are we gonna lose this game, like, and then the Hail Mary happens, and then bam. But yeah, definitely exceeded our expectations. Obviously, anyone
Right.
that thought they would be in the NFC championship game, or they would win 12 plus games, you're just completely lying to yourself unless you're you have like some type of like a what's the jump from Back to the Future, the sports almanac, where
Yeah.
you can just look ahead and be like, oh, let me look at this, what's in the future. But yeah, home memory, best memory, favorite memory. I would say it's probably. I'd say it's only because there's a lot of them, but I'd say my favorite memory was probably that Cincinnati game, just because it was like the big first spotlight game for this team, and
I've seen other
everyone's
people say that.
yeah, everyone was like, "Oh, prime time, we're gonna lose, me," and
They thought we were gonna get destroyed. Our own
exact
fan base thought
that's
we were
my
gonna
point.
get
That's my point.
destroyed.
Everyone thought, "Oh, Cincinnati, they're gonna destroy them." Washington prime time, that's like a bad recipe. Joe Burrow's ticked off. The Bengals are ticked off.
Right.
And we went out there toe to toe with them, battled it out. Obviously, the deep shot to Terry to win the game, and while Jaden's getting crushed in the pocket, but not even just that, to parlay that into a straight up ass whooping over in Arizona the next week following that, where obviously in years past we'd go to Arizona and we'd somehow come out flat and be by halftime we'd be down by like 20 plus points. Do we come back? Maybe, possibly, but it would be that type of game for them to come out, be firing on all cylinders, and just straight up just smack around Arizona like that. To me, that was the point where I was like, all right, yeah, this team is different. Like this is one of that was one of the better parts for me of the season. So I'll say that point.
Look, I appreciate. I think that you guys deserve respect for your opinions, but you're all wrong. Simply, to be quite frank about it, the most fondest memory I have of this past season is without a doubt the NFC Championship game. Terry McLaurin taking that screen pass to the house. Um, you play all season for moments in the dance. And not only did they win a playoff game, but in the second playoff game, they come out and just literally just go belt to ass on the Detroit Lions that entire
BTA.
game. And that is my most fondest memory because like that's when the stakes were at their highest. All of America was watching, expecting the Lions. Like the Lions people, they even had what's his face Beast. I think one of the gamer Twitch guys
Oh,
coming out
Mr.
saying
Beast or
that you
whatever.
guys have no chance. Like maybe you should
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
stick to video.
Has that dude even been back on recently, like
No,
since
but
then? Because I
I
know
should tell
he
him
was MIA.
stick to video games, my dude. You're out of your realm here. But it was without a doubt the Detroit Lions game because that was the tip. That was really when they played their best all season long, and that was that game where they played complementary football, all three phases, and they just went to town, dude. And that was brought the biggest smile to everyone's faces. That brought the most hope that possible. So my fondest memory, without a doubt, is that divisional round ass whooping to the Detroit Lions that everyone was talking about. Ben Johnson wanted to look the other way on us talking about basketball guys and everything like that. Not on that Saturday. They were football guys that day, without a doubt. Now, the next question from the Colonel. Hall, some of the early mock drafts indicate offensive tackle on edge as our primary draft needs. Obviously, players can be obtained via trade and free agency as well. But shouldn't we be seeing cornerback pretty high on that list as well?
Yes, I do believe. But again, maybe it goes back to what David Harrison was talking about. Of as of right now, maybe cornerback is on their list, but I think it might be like they're having those discussions of like, okay, first of all, who's in free agency, who's in the draft, what are we going to do with Mikey? Do we like him on the outside? How can we kind of work this in? So I think as the process goes along, maybe you might see cornerback go up or down on the list depending on how they view Mikey Samerstill and the rest of that defense. But for me personally, I would still say cornerback would be higher on that list because you do have an aging Marshawn Lattimore, and you're going to have that next up and coming guy
Correct.
behind him and behind Mikey Somerset as well. Maybe he turns into the number one. Who knows? But yeah, you're still going to have that pipeline of guys like coming through to
Right.
replace whoever gets older or leaves in free agency. So it would be high on my list. But yeah, I think that yeah, like I said, it'll fluctuate up and down just because as the process gets closer and the draft gets closer, as we go through free agency, you kind of, as you said, fill needs or supplement positions. We'll see how that goes. So, yeah, I do think cornerback eventually will be there, and I do expect them to be, if not free agency, definitely the draft.
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, Colonel, I think tackle is, of course, something you want to keep an eye on. Of course, the cornerback position is it's weird for me personally because, in my opinion, I think a speed rusher, somebody like a Minka Parsons, really accelerates a play to the point where the ball has to get out quick, which really
Yep.
benefits those corners. So I think that edge, if you could find that guy in that first round or in that second round, that could kind of be able to do that for you. That is way more important than actually going to get another corner, right? You invested heavily last draft with Mikey Sammerstill in the second round. It paid dividends for you. You have a guy like Noah here, possibly you could retain, but you would want to see more aggressiveness when it comes to the line of scrimmage and behind the line of scrimmage and run support, especially with somebody like that. Because if you are going to be deploying that many small guys, you have to make sure your small guys can come up, be aggressive, and make some big time plays in the run game. And I think that's something that they could possibly get better at in this draft, of course. But I think that edge, in my personal opinion, getting that speed is more important than it is of adding a corner. But of course, you could always get better at corner. You need some depth, but it's not one of those things I think is going to be high as a priority. I do think that solidifying the trenches is more important.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree. I think I've been saying on Twitter that edge is like my number one need for this team right now, just because, again, everyone's talking about setting the edge, and obviously they were bad against the run throughout the season, but it was yes, it was the edges, but it was really they were getting gashed up the middle a lot. But as far as like an edge that can set the edge, obviously yes, but I was a little more like talking about also a guy that can command the double team, that is going to get you double digit plus sacks, that's going to command a double team dead down in and down out. So that's going to free up guys on the inside to get the one on ones, or it'll free a guy up on the other side of the field to get that single rush or a blitzer or whatever it may be. And to your point, everything correlates. So that helps out the guys in the back end as well. So maybe if you get a dominant edge rusher, you get okay, maybe I don't have to address corner as heavily as I thought I would be, because now I got a guy that's going to speed the quarterback up and maybe help us out on the back end. So I definitely agree that edge is like should be like one number one star, 1A and B for this team going into free agency and the draft.
Yeah, and if you can go back to the off season before this past season, like that was one of my biggest questions is how they're going to replicate that pressure without having those kind of end special pieces, right? But look, credit to Dante Fowler and company. They did a great job this year, and
Yeah.
Frankie Louvu. But now this next question is from Deluxe. How would you address the run defense? Would it be by adding to the defensive end room, which is a similar type of question, just differently phrased?
Yeah, I think that I would add to the defensive end room. Again, if you just look back at when the defensive line was at the peak of their powers, you had Chase on one side, Montez on the other side, and those guys were commanding a double team. Maybe Montez, maybe Chase a little bit more here and there, but then you had guys on the inside that were getting freed up for the one on ones. And then once Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen became those dudes, you saw that they were getting the double teams, but then Chase and Montez weren't really producing off the edges as much as we would have liked them to. So it kind of goes all hand in hand, works together where you're going to need at least one or two guys that are going to command double teams and take the pressure off the rest of the guys to free them up to win their one-on-one battles and then get after the quarterback, whatever it may be. So, yeah, to your point, to stop the run, I think they do need a legit edge rusher to alleviate some pressure from the guys on the inside to maybe win their one-on-one battles, be able to maybe open up the running lanes or run gaps for maybe Bobby Wagner or Luvu, whoever it is back there at linebacker.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, on that first Saquon Barkley touchdown run, you can lose the edge sometimes. Like that can happen. Of course, that happens in a game, but it happened to Washington a lot. But all I'm saying is that can happen every now and again, right? But what cannot happen as a safety is not finishing those tackles. How embarrassing that was, and I still think about it, as weird as that is. But I was talking to my Philadelphia Eagles coworker, like that's inexcusable to allow. So how would I address the run defense? Is by investing in secondary, big, long secondary guys that are good on the ball, being able to get those long paws, long arms in the way of passes, being able to play that grippy type of defense, but also being able to get their head into the mud, into those kind of chaotic situations, and being a cog, an issue, and being a solidifying tackler. This safety class, I was able to look at a couple guys. The guy from South Carolina has the build of the type that they like. I think he's about 6'3", kind of a bigger dude, and obviously that's what Dan Quinn and company they kind of like. And if you're going to deploy a lot of those secondary members, you need a bigger guy, which brings up Tyler Owens. Yeah, he only saw a lot of special teams, but he's a big dude, man. And maybe he's somebody who could contribute more on defense next season once he gets fully healthy, of course. But how would I address it? I think it's secondary, but also I think Bobby being nicked up was not helpful. And so I think that possibly investing more into linebacker, just in case of those type of scenarios in the future, is something Washington should really be invested into and to making sure happens. Which, speaking of, comes into our next question. And would I do it by adding into the defensive end room? I've already been saying all season long, even before the season, defensive end was something that needs to be addressed. And it still does, in my personal opinion. No disrespect to those guys out there. But the next question from Tim Towner was Jordan McGee a future off-ball linebacker or a walking injury machine?
I mean, I think only time will tell. I mean, he's only been 1 year into his career. Obviously, he was hampered with the injuries. Made a comeback for a couple games, and then I want to say he got re-injured again, and I think he did. But yeah, like I said, only time will tell. We'll see how he progresses through the offseason, comes in for the offseason program and throughout training camp. But I know the plan, and they would love for him to be a guy that can step up, be relevant, and be part of the rotation and get some playing time on defense. But if he's not, I mean, obviously, again, free agency, the draft is there for that very reason. So, yeah, we'll see as far as injuries goes. We'll see how it plays out going forward.
Obviously did not have a great start to his NFL career, but being there with Ken Norton, Bobby, and Frankie, obviously they held a lot of weight on their shoulders. Obviously the injuries were a big concern for Jordan McGee, but I think as depth-wise, that's somebody you could feel confident in just looking at the future ahead to say, depth guy could earn his way onto the field if possible, if certain things do happen. But I do think it's something that at this year especially, he was a walking injury machine. But that doesn't mean that that's what his future is going to be, right? Just being honest, because we didn't get to see all that much. Obviously, it was more like special teams that he was helping out more so than anything else. But yeah, obviously the first year was not great. Next question from Tim Towner, was Johnny Newton a bust or a steal? Keep talking. I got to blow my nose.
I would say he a steal just because the guy had a first round grade on him. It's a guy that came in and was learning from Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne till Jonathan Allen got injured and was forced to step in and become like a more of a role player, more snaps, whatever it may be, higher snap count. And yeah, I think he flashed. He definitely had a couple of moments, tackle for losses, getting after the quarterback, like pressures, some run stops and whatnot. So I would say that another offseason, him learning from a guy like Jonathan Allen or Deron Payne or whoever it may be, second year into the defensive system, and his first offseason where he's probably going to be fully healthy and can able to train in the offseason and really get his body right. So I do think that definitely not a bust yet, or not even at all. And I do think that yeah, I wouldn't call him a steal yet because he's not out here looking like Jalen Carter or nothing
Right.
like that. You know what I'm saying? So, but he could maybe turn into that because that's who he was at Illinois for the most part. Not like Jalen Carter, but I'm saying as far as like a disruptor, getting after the quarterback and whatnot. So healthy offseason as opposed to last year getting the surgeries and whatnot. Another season into the system of the defense, and another season off season where you're learning from guys like Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, other guys around the league, just getting more intel and more more hand moves and whatnot. So I do think that eventually we'll say, oh, that was a steal right there because Adam Peters and Dan Quinn believe that he's a steal. So I do think he'll be a steal, but time will tell. But to say he's a bust, I would just say that's completely out of the question.
Yeah, I would say that it's neither, to be honest. I think you got exactly your money's worth. Because coming into the season before the draft, right, if you thought about Jonathan Allen being out for a long period of time, you would have been very concerned about this defensive line, just being able to be productive in any sense. And Johnny Newton came in relief and did a very good job, was able to be disruptive when he needed to be. There were a couple goal line stands that he was pivotal on. And he was somebody that I think that you got to see the progression as the season went on. And so when you look at it, it's not like he wasn't used. It's not like a Luke McCaffrey, so to speak, from an offensive minded sense, because if you're drafting a wide receiver and you have an injury to like Noah Brown and you have a collection of different guys, you would think that wide receiver would be used, right? But not. But Johnny Newton was obviously used and came in relief for a long period of time. So I think you exactly got your money's worth from a high second round pick. But I wouldn't say it nowhere close to a bust. The steal aspect, there's still something to be proven in that sort of sense, and you're asking for like domination at that point, making a real big presence, and it's hard to be able to do that in your first year. I think Jalen Carter himself even struggled to do that at times in his rookie year. So obviously he has room to grow, and he's a different player than Jordan Carter, of course. But he is somebody that is a smaller stature, a Tasmanian type of devil that really does create havoc for you. It's just more fitting into the scheme, knowing what's coming and what's not, is where his next step is going to be. Now the next question that we have is from Andy Lockhart in the UK. Oi! In the 1 Point Safety Show. What is more important, Hall? Fixing the O-line in draft and free agency to help Jaden and also the run game, or more important to fix the D-line with run stopping?
It's a good question. I would say stopping the run, just because I mean we were like last place or like 31st in the league in run defense, and I mean we saw in the playoffs, like obviously when it gets to like January football, you're gonna have to be able to run the football and stop the run if you want to keep advancing into the playoffs. And we were minimal at running the ball. Obviously, it was a lot had to do with Jaden being like the driving force of that run game, but we were able to run the ball a little bit. And I'm not even gonna say we stopped the run in Tampa, because like the first half, Bucky Irving kind of went crazy on us, and then honestly, if Ben Johnson just keeps giving the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs, who knows how that other game turns out. So, yeah, definitely, I would say as much as the offensive line definitely needs to start getting better push, and the running backs need to definitely like see better like running lanes and be able to hit the holes a little bit harder and get north and south instead of kind of that pity patter east and west stuff. But I would say that the offense was still moving the ball, and we had the short passing game, the screen game, kind of the extension of the run game. So I do think that, and we saw this year, obviously, with them not being able to run the ball for the most part, the second half of the season with the running backs, they were still be able to put points on the board, move the ball up and down the field. So I would say that if they can be able to stop the run on defense, that helps the offense out a little bit more, a couple more possessions for the offense, maybe some more points on the board, because the offense is pretty efficient for the most part. So I got to go with the defensive line.
I would agree with you, but being able to run the football sustainably, I think that can you question to say, would adding an electric kind of running back more so help you being able to create their own yardage, right? Is that going to help you out more so than investing heavily up front? I think that running the football, especially looking forward, is going to be massive. Getting back to what Washington was able to do early on in the year, and they were really able to control games, make things easier on Jaden as a rookie passer. I want to continue that. I don't want to go into next season saying Jaden is going to be 80% of all the passing game and also like 80% of the run game, right? We want to kind of change that. But that being said, your strengths get you to the postseason. Your weaknesses is what gets you out of the postseason, and we certainly saw that in this playoff. And so I think the run defense is obviously more important that you want to invest into. The difficulty thing here, Andy, is what was the reason for? And I don't think it's very easy to just come out and specifically say the defensive line is where you need to get better. I think it's a very complex issue as to why things went awry, especially in the run game. And I think it's has to do with both the defensive line, linebackers, and safeties, corners being able to come up and make tackles. And so it's hard for me to say, but I would say you probably really want to invest in stopping that run. And because you've already done so well in the passing attack on defense, that if you're able to nullify runs a little bit more, you're really helping out this football team. But that being said, if you're able to control on the ground and run the ball sustainably on offense, defense not going to have as much energy off of them during these games, right? So
I was gonna say like to
very good question, to be honest.
yeah, I was gonna say that's a great question, but I was gonna say to your kind of the side of the talking discussion, I was gonna say adding offensive linemen and like obviously everyone wants a explosive, like game changing or like take it to the house 80+ yards type of running back, but to your point, if you invest in that as opposed to stopping the run as much, like if you got to pick either or, you could also play keep away with like ball control and keeping the clock moving, converting, even though we convert third and fourth downs like ridiculous clips, but just keeping the ball moving, clock management, ball
That being
control,
said,
playing keep
even
away.
if you do that, you give up a Saquon Barkley
And
60-yard run
that's
on the
kind of my
first
point where it's like
first.
you're still giving up the
Yeah,
explosive. If not in the pass game, you're still giving up the explosives in the run game, which is like, okay, you're still getting your defense or your offense right back on the field again. So it's like
right.
that's why you got to go both, honestly.
Yeah, and I know it's hard to be able to say that. It's not really giving the question all of its worth and respect, but like literally, there's no other way to discuss it. You have to be able to take care of both,
Yeah.
and that honestly, going into this offseason, that's probably mo number one,
Oh
is
yeah.
being able to actually be able to win in the trenches. And so, without a doubt, that's where your focus is going to be, is in the trenches and possibly finding a playmaker here or there to help out things just a little bit more, so it's not so bare and the
And
weight is all on Jaden to make
and it
plays.
kind of just goes to also their whole identity of what they've kind of built from day one, as far as like we're gonna be tough, physical, hit you in the mouth. What a way to do that is kind of to build the trenches up, offensive line, punch you in the mouth, be able to run the ball, control the ball, but also hit those explosives with Jaden and Terry
Right.
McLaurin, whoever the other wide receiver may be. So, I mean, it's definitely a good question. It's definitely a good discussion.
Absolutely. Any last minute words, sir, before we head out of here?
Nah, just like I said before when we kind of started, just excited for this is honestly like the first time, like obviously I don't want the season to be over. I wish we were playing in a week and a half or whatever it is. But at the same token, this is the first time in my entire life where I'm like, there's actually like something to look forward to in 2026, like or the 2025 season, as far as like hopefully we can build off of what we did this year. And I'm not saying like obviously it's not promised you get back to the NFC Championship game or because we got to the NFC Championship, then next year we're automatically going to the Super Bowl. We're taking that next leap. But it's all about putting yourself in the position to have a chance to do that again. And for the first time, I'm like literally my entire life that I can remember, this is the first off season where we have a chance to build on something that was successful from the year before. So, and I trust the people that are in place to actually do the correct things, not just be like, well, we did it this way, so we're going to stick to this way. Like they seem like guys that are like, we're going to keep adapting, evolving, and changing with the way that the league is going. So, but still staying true to ourselves and what we want to do as far as our culture. So, yeah, long story short, I wish we were still playing, but I'm also excited for what's to come in the future, the near future, and the next couple of years down the line because I do think they are building something legit,
Hmm.
sustainable, and hopefully successful.
Yes, and remember, my biggest takeaway from this overall season, something that Washington fans should hang their hat on, including Hall here, is that getting to the NFC Championship game in your first year and having guys like Jaden Daniels, Johnny Newton, having Mikey Sanders still out there, automatically adds credibility to their name on top
Yep.
of everyone else here. So whenever you have new guys coming into this equation, automatically in their first year, those guys have a standard. They have a sort of credential about them to the point where we have to follow in line and follow what they do. That's the biggest takeaway from all of Washington fans, is that that standard has been set. That expectation of success has been set. And that is
Yep.
incredibly valuable. And now you leave it in the hands of Adam Peters and Dan Quinn to go find their commanders guys to add into the equation, to buy in and to be able to keep up with that standard is something that all Washington fans should be very excited over.
It's what we've been waiting for and wanting
Yeah.
for 25, 30 plus years.
And it's not by going out and trading for an acclimated vet at quarterback or anything like literally our first year guys coming in with that sort of credential with them is something that we're not used to, and we all have to take into consideration and say we're in a very good position.
Nikki Javala was like, this will be the first offseason probably that she's been here since she's covered this team where there's no name discussion, there's no owner discussion, there's no off the field discussion, there's no head coach discussion, there's no quarterback discussion. It's literally like strictly how can we build off of the successful year of last year. And that's literally like the most beautiful thing to hear.
Future is bright, baby. All right, everybody. If you made it this far, you're a frickin' champion. We'll see you guys again. Because it's the off season, we're probably going to be adjusting to only Wednesdays. Starting on the 16th, I'm going to be doing these draft episodes with Deuce and company on Sunday evenings. And so pretty sure I'm going to be preoccupied with that, having to do draft prep. Starting to watch the safeties. Watched Cam Ward today. Going to have to look at some kickers, of course, here soon. But keep an eye out for that. But most likely expect us a week from today. If not, if we get guests or something, we might do a Sunday show. But just keep in mind of what possibly comes down the pipeline. Possibly this Sunday. Don't 100% know. I'll talk to the boys. But all right, everybody. I'm Kyle.
I'm Hall.
And we'll see you guys again on Sunday or Wednesday. Have a great, safe week, everybody. Washington football. Woo!
Peace.
What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.